The first time Eleanor Graves tried to find me for parking my own work truck in my own driveway, she smiled while doing it, like she was handing me a Christmas card instead of a threat. She stood there in a cream-colored blazer with a clipboard tucked against her chest, morning sunlight bouncing off those oversized sunglasses, and said, "We have standards here, Mr. Bennett." Standards. Funny word coming from a woman whose husband kept a rusted fishing boat parked on the side of their mansion year-round, like some kind of decorative swamp ornament. But that's how all this started, not with screaming, not with lawsuits, not even with money. It started with one woman who got addicted to power and one exhausted contractor who just moved into the wrong neighborhood at exactly the wrong time. My name's Cole Bennett. I'm 51 years old, born and raised outside Sacramento, California, and I own a small paving company my father started back in the late 70s. Nothing glamorous. Asphalt, concrete, retaining walls. Honest work that leaves your shoulders aching and your boots permanently stained gray. We built shopping center parking lots, repaired school driveways, fixed sidewalks after tree roots cracked them apart. The kind of work nobody notices until it isn't done. About 8 months before all this happened, my marriage ended quietly. No cheating, no screaming plates across the kitchen. Just 26 years slowly wearing thin until one day we both realized we were living like polite roommates. The divorce took more out of me than I admitted to anybody. I sold the old house, split everything fair, and bought a place in a subdivision called Willow Creek Estates because, honestly, I thought peace and quiet sounded nice for once. Big mistake. The neighborhood looked perfect at first. Tree-lined streets, neat lawns, little American flags hanging from porches, the smell of cut grass drifting through the air every Saturday morning. Retired couples walked tiny dogs like they were rehearsing for a Hallmark movie. Kids rode bikes in circles near the mailboxes. It felt safe, almost too safe. I should have trusted my gut right there, because places that look too perfect usually hide something ugly underneath. My property sat near the end of a cul-de-sac, a single-story ranch with a wide driveway perfect for my 2 company trucks. 1 flatbed, 1 dump truck, clean vehicles, company logos professionally painted, both fully registered. I wasn't running a junkyard. Hell, I'd spent nearly 20 grand redoing the landscaping because I didn't want to be that guy moving into a nice neighborhood. Then came Eleanor Graves. She was president of the Willow Creek HOA, and she introduced herself exactly 3 days after I moved in. I remember hearing heels clicking down the driveway before I even opened the door. Click, 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 like a metronome counting down to a migraine. "Mr. Bennett," she said, offering a smile that somehow felt rehearsed. "Welcome to Willow Creek. We're very proud of our community image here." Community image. Again with the code words. I thanked her politely because that's what grown adults do, but the whole conversation felt strange. She kept glancing past me toward my trucks like they were dead raccoons. "Those vehicles," she finally asked, tapping her clipboard with manicured nails, "they won't be staying overnight regularly, correct?" I actually laughed because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. "Then my company trucks," I told her. "I own the house. They stay where I stay." Her smile tightened just a little. Tiny movement, but enough. "Well," she said softly, "I'm sure we can work something out." Looking back now, that sentence carried more threat than promise. For about 2 months, nothing happened. I kept my yard spotless, helped my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, repair her broken fence after a storm, brought in everyone's trash bins during high winds one week because half the neighborhood was out of town. People liked me. At least most of them did. But Eleanor, she watched. Every morning around 8:15, she'd walk the neighborhood with that clipboard like a prison warden doing rounds. Measuring grass. Photographing mailboxes. Once I caught her staring at my driveway from across the street while pretending to check her phone. Then one Tuesday morning, I opened my mailbox and found a certified envelope waiting inside. Violation notice. Bold red letters across the top, like I'd committed tax fraud. According to the HOA board, my commercial vehicles were negatively affecting property values and violating community aesthetic standards. Effective immediately, I owed a $700 monthly non-compliance fee unless the vehicles were removed permanently. $700 for parking legal trucks in my own driveway. I remember standing there in the morning heat reading the letter 3 times because my brain genuinely refused to process that level of insanity. Then I noticed something else. Across the street from Eleanor's house sat her husband's enormous fishing boat covered by a faded blue tarp, and beside it, a lifted camper van that looked like it had survived 3 apocalypses. That was the exact moment I realized this wasn't about rules. It wasn't about aesthetics either. Eleanor Graves simply didn't think somebody like me belonged in her neighborhood. And unfortunately for her, I've never reacted well when somebody mistakes kindness for weakness. I didn't storm over to Eleanor's house right away. Honestly, I tried to handle it like a normal adult. That night, I sat on my kitchen table with the violation notice, a beer going warm beside me, and read through the entire HOA handbook page by page, front to back, twice. You know what I found? Nothing. Not one sentence banning work trucks. Not one paragraph about commercial vehicles. The wording was vague enough to make lawyers rich and regular people miserable, but there was no actual rule saying I couldn't park my trucks there, which meant Eleanor had either invented the fee herself, or she assumed I was too dumb to question her authority. Both possibilities irritated me more than they should have. So the next morning, I walked across the street and knocked on her door. Eleanor opened it already dressed like she was heading into a corporate board meeting instead of terrorizing suburban homeowners before breakfast. "Mr. Bennett," she said coolly, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" I read the bylaws. I told her. There's no restriction on my trucks. She didn't even blink. The board has discretionary authority to preserve community standards. That sounds like legal talk for we make it up as we go. Her smile twitched. Tiny crack in the armor. You're being defensive. You're charging me $700 for owning a pickup truck. A commercial pickup truck. Funny, I said, pointing toward the street, because your husband's ugly fishing boat seems pretty commercial to me. Her face changed right there. Not dramatic, just colder, like somebody quietly turning down the temperature in a room. That vessel, she replied carefully, is protected under prior exemptions. Show me. Excuse me. Show me the exemption. Silence. She folded her arms slowly. Mr. Bennett, I think you'd be happier somewhere more suited to your lifestyle. There it was. Not even subtle anymore. My lifestyle. Meaning blue collar. Meaning contractor. Meaning not wealthy enough for Willow Creek Country Club Fantasyland. I looked past her shoulder into that giant marble-floored entryway and suddenly understood everything about Eleanor Graves. She didn't care about the neighborhood. She cared about control. The HOA was just her favorite weapon. Things escalated fast after that. 3 days later, I got notice of an emergency board meeting scheduled with less than 24 hours warning. That alone violated their own procedures, which told me either Eleanor was panicking or she'd gotten so comfortable abusing power she stopped bothering to hide it. The meeting took place in the clubhouse, and when I walked in, only 4 people were there. Eleanor, a nervous older man named Richard Bell, 2 retired women who looked terrified of breathing incorrectly. Eleanor sat at the center table beneath fluorescent lights, humming overhead like angry insects. "Mr. Bennett," she announced, "we're here to discuss repeated non-compliance issues." I sat down slowly. Funny, I'm here to discuss illegal meetings. Richard Bell immediately avoided eye contact. Poor guy looked like he regretted every life decision that brought him there. Eleanor ignored me and began reading from a prepared statement about preserving property values and maintaining neighborhood integrity. Every sentence sounded rehearsed, polished, corporate, but underneath it, you could hear something uglier breathing. Fear. Because people obsessed with control are usually terrified of losing it. Then she dropped the bomb. Effective immediately, The board had voted to prohibit all commercial vehicles overnight within community limits. Violators would face daily fines and possible liens against their property. I actually laughed out loud. Couldn't help it. You voted already? I asked. Without homeowners present. The board acted within emergency authority. What emergency? I said. My truck suddenly become radioactive? One of the older women coughed to hide a laugh. Eleanor shot her a look sharp enough to peel paint. Mr. Bennett, she snapped, your attitude is becoming disruptive. No, I replied calmly. Your corruption is becoming obvious. Dead silence. You could hear the clubhouse air conditioner rattling in the ceiling vents. I pulled out my phone and placed it face up on the table. I'm recording this meeting, I said. Richard Bell nearly choked. Eleanor's eyes narrowed instantly. You can't record board proceedings without consent. California's a one-party consent state, I replied. And honestly, I figured you'd know that. God, I'll never forget her face in that moment. Like someone slapped her with a frozen fish. That meeting ended badly. Eleanor threatened legal action. I threatened my own attorney. She warned me about escalating consequences. I told her intimidation works better on people who scare easy. But the weird part wasn't the meeting itself. It was what happened after. See, once people think you're a problem, they stop hiding things around you. Over the next few weeks, neighbors quietly started talking. Mrs. Alvarez told me Eleanor had fined a widower $300 because his grandson's bicycle was visible from the street. Another family got violation notices over wind chimes. A single mother named Dana Ruiz had nearly lost her home fighting bogus penalties tied to visual clutter. And every story followed the same pattern. Eleanor targeted people who didn't fit her version of Willow Creek. Working-class families, immigrants, divorced residents, older homeowners living on fixed incomes, anybody vulnerable enough to pressure. Then I learned something else, something that changed this whole situation from annoying HOA drama into something much darker. Eleanor's husband, Grant Graves, had been meeting privately with a development company called Silver Point Communities. Expensive luxury developers, the kind that bought aging neighborhoods, pushed out middle-class residents, then rebuilt everything into overpriced modern homes with words like executive and premium slapped onto the brochures. At first it sounded like gossip, until Jake Mercer got involved. Jake lived 2 houses down from me. Former newspaper photographer, sarcastic as hell, drank whiskey like hydration was optional. Good guy. He knocked on my door one night, holding a camera lens in one hand and a six-pack in the other. You want to see something weird? He asked. We sat in my garage while he showed me photos he'd taken over the previous month. Eleanor meeting with Silver Point reps. Eleanor's husband walking undeveloped lots with surveyors. Expensive black SUVs visiting the neighborhood late at night. That woman's planning something, Jake muttered. And I don't think it's about parking violations. He was right. A week later, foreclosure notices started appearing. Not just mine. Dana Ruiz got one. Mrs. Alvarez got one over unpaid landscaping violations. Another older couple received threats tied to structural noncompliance because their roof color supposedly violated updated aesthetic standards nobody remembered voting on. People were scared, and fear changes neighborhoods fast. Suddenly nobody talked outside anymore. Curtains stayed closed. Kids stopped riding bikes after dinner. Every time Eleanor walked past with that clipboard, conversations died mid-sentence. Willow Creek stopped feeling like a neighborhood and started feeling like occupied territory. Then Eleanor made her biggest mistake. She came after my business directly. One Friday morning, city inspectors showed up at my house because of anonymous complaints claiming I was illegally storing hazardous materials. The inspector looked embarrassed before he even stepped out of the truck. Honestly, he sighed, I think somebody's weaponizing code enforcement. They found nothing, of course, because there was nothing to find. But while they inspected my property, Eleanor stood across the street pretending to water flowers while watching the whole thing happen, smiling. That was the moment something inside me changed. Up until then, I still thought maybe this could be solved peacefully. Maybe Eleanor was just bitter, lonely, addicted to authority. But standing there watching her enjoy, trying to destroy my livelihood, I realized peace was never an option. Eleanor Graves didn't want compliance. She wanted submission. And unfortunately for her, right around that same time, I discovered something buried deep in old county property records that would turn her entire empire upside down. Something Eleanor should have checked before declaring war on me. Because the truth was, she had absolutely no idea who legally owned the power in Willow Creek Estates. The discovery happened on a Thursday afternoon that smelled like dust, old paper, and rain-soaked concrete. Patricia Sloan, the attorney Jake connected me with, had spent 3 straight days digging through county archives trying to find proof Eleanor violated HOA procedure. What we found instead felt like uncovering a loaded weapon hidden beneath the floorboards. We were sitting inside the county recorder's office while fluorescent lights buzzed overhead and an elderly clerk rolled out the original subdivision documents for Willow Creek Estates. Most of it looked like the usual legal nonsense nobody reads unless they're getting sued. Then Patricia suddenly froze mid-page. "Cole," she whispered slowly, "you need to look at this." I leaned closer. Buried deep in the original development covenants was a clause tied specifically to my property address. Lot 14, my lot. According to the documents, the original developer had retained permanent founding oversight authority tied to that parcel until formally dissolved by transfer vote. Problem was the authority had never been dissolved, which meant when I bought the house after my divorce, those rights transferred directly to me. Patricia looked like she'd just found buried treasure. "Do you understand what this means?" she asked. Not even a little. She actually laughed. "Cole, legally speaking, Eleanor can't pass major HOA amendments without approval from your property. Ich blinze her." "Wait, no," Patricia interrupted, already grinning. "It gets better. Any fines, liens, emergency assessments, enforcement actions, all of them require oversight acknowledgement from the founding authority." Meaning Eleanor Graves spent 8 months threatening people with powers she technically never had. I swear the room went quiet inside my head for a second. All those violation notices, all those foreclosure threats, all the fear she'd spread through the neighborhood like poison in the water. Illegal. Every bit of it. Patricia kept reading while rain tapped against the windows outside. "Cole, if she knowingly abused board authority while bypassing covenant requirements, this crosses into fraud territory." Fraud. That word hit different, because suddenly this wasn't annoying HOA drama anymore. Eleanor hadn't just bullied people. She'd manipulated families into paying illegal penalties under threat of losing their homes. And somehow, the deeper we dug, the uglier it got. Jake uncovered financial records linking Grant Graves to Silver Point communities, consulting payments, development incentives, quiet agreements tied to neighborhood transition potential. Translation? Eleanor wasn't trying to improve Willow Creek. She was intentionally destabilizing it. Pressure middle-class homeowners until they sold cheap. Then help developers swoop in and rebuild the neighborhood into a luxury enclave none of us could afford. That realization made me sick. Because people like Dana Ruiz and Mrs. Alvarez weren't collateral damage. They were targets. Patricia wanted to file immediately, but I stopped her. "No," I said quietly. "I want her exposed publicly." So we waited, and Eleanor kept digging her own grave. Another round of violation letters went out. More foreclosure threats. Another emergency assessment nobody legally approved. Every move she made gave Patricia more ammunition. Then came the annual HOA meeting. God, I'll never forget that night as long as I live. The clubhouse was packed wall to wall. Homeowners standing shoulder to shoulder, voices buzzing nervously beneath fluorescent lights, while folding chairs scraped against the floor. Eleanor sat at the front table wearing a white suit jacket like she was running for Senate. Calm, confident, completely unaware her entire world was about to collapse. She opened the meeting with her usual rehearsed speech about preserving property values and protecting community standards. Same fake smile, same polished tone. Then she started discussing necessary foreclosure actions against non-compliant residents. That's when Mrs. Alvarez stood up. Tiny woman, maybe 5 feet tall on a good day. Hands shaking. "You try to take my house," she said softly. The room fell silent instantly. Eleanor's expression tightened. "Mrs. Alvarez, this is not the appropriate forum for emotional accusations. My husband built that house," she continued, voice trembling harder now. "We raised our children there. And you tried to scare me into leaving because my garden decorations embarrassed you." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Dana Ruiz stood up too. "You told me single mothers lower neighborhood standards." Eleanor immediately snapped back. "That is completely false. You said my son made the street look crowded." Murmurs spread across the room. Angry ones. Jake rose next, holding a stack of photographs. "You met privately with Silver Point developers for 6 months while targeting homeowners financially." Eleanor's face drained slightly for the first time. "Those meetings were exploratory." "Funny," Jake said, "because your husband got paid for them." Boom. Room exploded into shouting. People yelling questions, demanding answers. Eleanor slammed her clipboard against the table. "Enough," she shouted. "This meeting is under board authority." "Actually," Patricia interrupted calmly from the back of the room, "it isn't." Every head turned as she walked forward, carrying a leather folder thick enough to break bones. Eleanor stared at her. "And who exactly are you?" Patricia smiled politely. "The attorney representing the legal founding authority of Willow Creek Estates." Confusion swept through the crowd instantly. Eleanor frowned. "There is no founding authority." That's when Patricia handed the original covenant documents directly to the homeowners seated near the front. "There is," she replied, "and according to county records, Mr. Cole Bennett holds it." I stood up slowly while the room erupted again. Eleanor looked at me like she'd seen a ghost. "No," she whispered. Patricia didn't even blink. "Every enforcement action issued under Mrs. Graves' administration is legally compromised due to covenant violations and unauthorized authority abuse." Richard Bell nearly fell back in his chair. "You mean the fines are invalid?" "Potentially all of them," Patricia answered. Eleanor stood abruptly. "This is absurd. He manipulated records. Careful," Patricia said sharply. "Because we also have evidence of fraudulent enforcement practices, illegal foreclosure intimidation, selective discrimination, and financial misconduct involving HOA funds." You could physically feel the air leave the room. Eleanor's confidence vanished right there in front of everybody. For the first time since I met her, she looked small, human, afraid. Then Jake placed enlarged photos on the front table. Eleanor meeting with developers. Grant Graves with survey crews. Financial documents. Payment records. Silence swallowed the room whole. Finally, Mrs. Alvarez spoke again, barely above a whisper. "You were trying to get rid of us." Eleanor opened her mouth, and nothing came out, because there was nothing left to say. The collapse happened fast after that. Lawsuits, criminal investigations, financial audits. Silver Point abandoned the project almost overnight once reporters got involved. Several homeowners received compensation settlements from the HOA insurance carrier. Eleanor resigned before formal removal proceedings even finished. Last I heard, her house eventually sold below market value after legal fees buried them alive financially. Funny how life works sometimes. As for Willow Creek, it slowly became a neighborhood again. Kids came back outside. People talked on sidewalks. Mrs. Alvarez expanded her garden out front with giant colorful pinwheels that absolutely violated Eleanor's old aesthetic standards, which honestly made them beautiful. And me? I still park both company trucks in my driveway every single night. Sometimes I stand outside with coffee early in the morning, listening to sprinklers hiss across the lawns while sunlight hits the truck doors, and I think about how close fear came to winning there for a while. But here's the part people argue about whenever I tell this story. Some neighbors still believe Eleanor started with good intentions. That power just poisoned her slowly over time. Others think she always saw people like us as obstacles instead of neighbors. Honestly, I still don't know. Maybe authority just reveals who somebody really is when nobody tells them no long enough. But I'll tell you this, communities fall apart real fast when fear becomes more important than humanity. So now I want to hear from you. Was Eleanor a villain from the beginning, or did power turn her into one? And if somebody threatened your home, your family, your livelihood the way she threatened ours, how far would you go to fight back? Let me know in the comments. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare yourself, subscribe, because trust me, this kind of suburban madness happens a lot more than people think.